So my name is Smedjeback. I'm a full-time animal rights and also climate activist. Live in Göteborg, Gothenburg. I was originally thinking of doing this in Swedish, but I will switch to English, so pardon me if I don't get all the words right at the moment. But I will be talking about what the animal rights movement can learn from other movements today. And hopefully we have a bit of time after for some questions and discussion. But we need to be finished here at 4 o'clock, I've heard. But we can do that. I don't know if you are like me, becoming frustrated that not more is happening in the animal rights cause. So many billions of animals are suffering each day. And still, we don't seem to be making a lot of progress. How many feel frustrated about this? Oh, there are quite a lot, yes. I'm glad I'm not the only one. But we know at the same time that many movements in our history has been really successful in changing behaviors, changing structures, and really reaching their goals. And wouldn't we be fools if we wouldn't try to learn from them? So in this presentation, I will try to get some lessons from the anti-slavery movement, from women's rights movement, from the environment movement, and LGBTQ movement. But it is really a challenge to pick out what kind of lessons you will draw from these movements and others. How our society is developing, it's so complex, so it's really difficult to know what to pick out, also for me, of course. It's so easy to become affected by your own biases. So remember that when you listen to my examples, that I'm also biased, just like everyone else. And before we begin to mention these examples, I want to point out that I'm in no way expert in these movements. So if I have made any mistakes, please tell me and I can correct them. And also, I will be mentioning these movements as successful in many ways. But it doesn't mean that these issues are settled. There are still many injustices in each and every one of these movements today. So I will begin by talking about the anti-slavery movement in the US and Great Britain in the 1700s and 1800s, and point out what we can do to show the oppression and to free the oppressed. The slavery owners, they said that the slaves had really good lives. In fact, they had better lives than most people. But of course, that was nowhere to the truth. And anti-slavery activists try to show this. One of the examples, or one of the methods they used, was to make posters. So actually one of the first political posters in the world, I think this is. I don't know if you have seen it. It shows the slavery ship, the Brooks, which was built in Liverpool in the 1700s. And you can see this was the lower deck, filled with slaves. This was a bit shelves up from that level on the sides. So, of course, it shows how really packed these slave ships were and how terrible the conditions were. This is a commercial of the giant Arla, which is a multinational dairy company. This is one of the commercials. It says laguppställning i Bregottfabriken, which means something like when you show a team before a football match or something like that. And of course, the animal exploitation industry, they want to show how beautiful the animals have, how well they're taken care of. But of course, that's a lot of lies. They want to say that, oh, we take so good care of all animals. It's like it's a contract between the producers and the consumers. And us consumers, they want to say, oh, we won't ask any questions about the reality of how animals have it, and we won't tell you how it really is. We just want to show you how you wish it were, so they can continue. We can continue eating the meat and the eggs and the dairy. But I think that we in the animal rights movement need to show the reality of the animals. Here is a picture I took last year. We visited a pig farm, quite normal Swedish pig farm, where they have very little room to move and living on concrete floors in very tight boxes. But you could say, but we do that already. We show the reality of the animal industry. And of course that's true. It's no problem today to find how animals are treated. If you want to look for it, you can find it easily. Also how it looks in Sweden and many, many other countries. But the problem is that the animal industry go on with their propaganda day after day after day. So I think actually we'll try to do the same. We will need to show the reality day after day, also not in just a few places, but in different locations and at different times, to try to go against this propaganda. There was something called the Underground Railroad, and that was a system of routes and hiding places for slaves when slavery was taking part in the US in the 1800s. One of the very courageous people that you might have heard of was Harriet Tubman, who freed lots and lots of slaves through this system. About 1,000 slaves each year were freed according to this system. But of course that was very few compared to the 4 million slaves that were held at the same time each year in the US at that time. But it did matter, even though it was a small number, it mattered. Some of them were freed. Was this person, Frederick Douglass, and he became a prominent anti-slavery activist. He wrote an autobiography, and he held many speeches that really changed the opinion that people had on slavery at that time. So even though it was a small number, it created hope among the anti-slavery activists and for the slaves, thinking it can be possible to free slaves, and then it also can be possible to abolish the whole idea and system of slavery. In Sweden and many other countries, there are some animals being freed from animal exploitation. It's not many at all. It's just a tiny, tiny fraction of all animals that are in captivity. But I think in the same way it can create some hope also in the animal rights movement. We can show the reality of these animals in the industry, and we can also show how it can be when they are freed and can live in a free and loving home. And I think showing that difference can possibly create some hope and see what can be. There is a group formed last year called Alle vill leva, Everyone Wants to Live. And in the summer of last year, we went into the biggest hen slaughterhouse in Sweden. There we showed the reality, and we documented inside of the horrendous things that were happening there. And before these hens were taken into the slaughterhouse, we freed 4 of them. And later we also went to an egg factory and freed 6 of the hens, and also showed the before and after of these animals. Now, of course, like the slaves, the animals themselves can't write autobiographies or hold speeches, but we can tell their stories. And an advantage we have compared to before in the time of slavery is that we can document much better with photo and video. We can actually show how they were treated and how it can be. So I move on to the British suffragette movement in the beginning of the 1900s and the question of violence. So the British suffragette movement was consisting of tens of thousands of very brave women fighting for the vote in parliaments. It consisted of many different kinds of movements and organizations and using methods, everything from demonstrations in the streets to more radical methods like civil disobedience. Sometimes they chained themselves, like here. They often got caught by the police and they got imprisoned. When they hunger striked in prison, they were force-fed. Some of them up to 200 times, something you could very easily call torture. That was extremely painful to be force-fed like this. When they peacefully demonstrated in the streets, they were sexually harassed by police. Probably this cruel treatment radicalized many of the activists. Among the more mainstream organizations, there were those that were more radical, like the Women's Social and Political Union. They not only used these other movements, but sometimes they used arson, burning up buildings, and they also planted quite many bombs. Let's see. So their aim was not to take any lives, and actually they didn't kill anyone with any of the actions they did during this long time. There were some hurt because they also used whips. They had whips in the streets, hurting the politicians and some police sometimes. Sometimes they even used an axe, but no one got killed. Sometimes, one time they placed a bomb at St. Paul's Cathedral. Maybe you recognize this, one of the considered most holy buildings in Great Britain, this church in London. Now it was detonated to go off at midnight where they thought no one was there. So again, there was no aim to hurt or kill anyone. But actually they found it before it detonated. So they didn't blow up this building. But when people heard of this, it was an outcry because of risking of destroying this very sacred building. So then there was a huge discussion on the methods of the suffragettes. There is a term called the radical flank in sociology. And the thinking is that these more radical methods can make people more engaged and wanting to join movements in bigger numbers. The public can say things like, oh, I don't support that kind of method, but I do support what they are struggling for. That's a common response. And I would say in most, maybe all movements that have been successful, there has been this kind of radical flank with one movement using more radical methods. And although the suffragette movement was really successful, they got their vote, and incredible, brave women that did sacrificed so much for this. But I'm wondering if they would have abstained from violence and instead used more non-violent radical methods, how would that have affected their struggle and the results? It's still a discussion among historians and social scientists whether the use of violence was something that was helping their cause, or actually they succeeded even if they used these methods. On the one hand, these arsons and bombs got a lot of publicity, so the issue was really talked about, and it created a lot of pressure on the government. On the other hand, many people was negatively impacted and said, oh, this method is nothing I'm for, so they turned against the whole movement. Many politicians also thought that if they would give the right to vote after having used these methods, it would seem like they were supporting this kind of violence. And of course, they didn't want to do that. Let's see, yes. One night in this city, the city of Umeå, in 1994, there was an incident, maybe you have heard of it. They put 3 animal transports on fire with Molotov cocktails. And one of the trucks, they wrote, "Meat is murder." And this is seen as the starting point of a militant vegan movement in Sweden. For a long time after this, they talked about, politicians and the media, they talked about militant vegans as a threat in our society. I remember about 20 years ago, one of my colleagues at work, every time she saw an animal rights group on the street, maybe doing a demonstration or something, she went around them because she was afraid that someone would throw paint on her. I don't know if she had heard about that kind of action, or she was just seeing animal rights activists as like someone that would hurt her. But that was interesting. Now, one should say there has been very few violent actions from animal rights movement in Sweden altogether. And even when it was at its peak, there was very few people actually doing any violent or aggressive actions. But in spite of that, it has gotten a lot of publicity and also creating a lot of fear and negative reactions about veganism, about animal rights from the public. Now, personally, I don't think destroying property of any kind is violent in itself. I have myself, this is me in very pixel picture from when I disarmed weapons. I was active in the peace movement, so I went into a weapons factory with friends, disarming. This is Carl Gustav grenade launcher, actually used in the Iraq war that was going on at that time in 2008. So I'm not against that, not even today. But using fire, arson, and bombs is another thing. If you use these kind of methods, even if your aim is not to hurt anyone, you never know. It actually is a risk that someone gets hurt. I mean, someone living person, human or animal. If you want to use the method of destruction of property, you could use a simple hammer or something else, a safe tool. But like the suffragette movement, I'm wondering, is there a way to use this radical flank effect without using violence? Perhaps it's more effective to use non-violent methods and getting the same positive radical flank effect. If you use civil disobedience, which means to openly and peacefully challenge the law in different ways, you show that you're willing to risk something for a higher cause, in this case for stopping the enormous suffering of animals. And perhaps that can sway people to join a movement or to support your cause. Of course, you don't have to use civil disobedience to use non-violence. There are other ways, like secretly going into farms, like for instance Djurrättsalliansen, the Animal Rights Alliance, use very effectively to show how badly animals are treated, something I also support. But I am not completely sure if violence can work sometimes. This is a picture from Watts in Los Angeles, 1965. And I was discussing this with a friend of mine. It seems like when you look at the historical records that this kind of riots that were going on a lot by looting and also smashing windows at stores, it seems like the government was really worried that this would be going on and going on, and they wouldn't stop it unless they gave some rights and stopped the discrimination of black people in that time. So who knows, sometimes maybe it can work. But there has also been books like this one, Why Civil Resistance Works, The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict, by Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan, that came out in 2011. They showed, in general, when they looked at different violent and non-violent methods, that non-violence was effective. What do you say? It was vad heter det? Dubbelt så framgångsrika. Twice as effective. Thank you. As violence. Now, they looked mostly on independent movements around the world using non-violent methods compared to like guerrilla groups with weapons in different ways. But they pointed to some things that can make non-violence more effective, and one of them is that more people will feel included or attracted to the movement if it's non-violent. So you usually have more people coming, and also a lot of more diversity. So non-violent movement will attract more women and also older people than violent ones. That's what they show in this book. There is also a bigger chance of defection. So it could be a soldier that if they don't feel threatened by you, they more easily will come to your side. Can be also, I haven't seen examples of this yet, but if we are non-violent, there could be people from the animal exploitation industry, like at the slaughterhouse or farms, that maybe feel negative towards what they're doing in the industry, that maybe want to join us or at least show us maybe materials from inside. But if we are really violent and they feel threatened, then it's probably a lot less likely that they will help us, I think. There is another case why I feel reluctant to use and support the violence, and even if perhaps it is could be functioning in the short term at least. And for me, it's a bigger thing. I don't want to have a world, I don't want to create a world or being a part of it where the one with the biggest guns or the mightiest fists wins. That's not the world I want to be in. I want a world where we can peacefully live together and cooperate. And if I can contribute to that, I would. So we will move on to another movement and another question, and that's the environmental movement and the issue of inclusion. I don't know if you recognize these people on the picture. This is me and my twin brother. Can you see who's who? Who am I? On the left or the right? Left, yes. That's me, even though I got a beard now, like my brother. So this is me and him at a blockade with Extinction Rebellion, which is a climate movement starting in Great Britain. This is a few years ago in Malmö, where I grew up. So when I came into the Extinction Rebellion, no one asked me, do you have a gasoline car, or how much carbon dioxide have you let out today? Nothing about that if I was contributing to the climate crisis in any way. I would say that the environmental movement and the climate movement at large have not focused so much on individual behaviors and how much we fly or how much we drive a car and so on. And it seems to me to be a successful strategy to focus more on the structure, how we can influence political society at large rather than the individual behaviors of each and every person. Now one should say that more radical groups have criticized the bigger mainstream groups because some of the bigger environmental groups have maybe getting funding from big companies and rightly so. They have been criticized for greenwashing, which is of course when they say, oh, we are so green, we do this and this, but in the larger picture they might pollute a lot. If you go to the bigger mainstream animal rights groups today in Sweden, I would say that you are welcome, even if you're not a vegetarian or vegan. Some even have, or at least had, campaigns like Meat Free Monday, where they think that any meat reduction is good. But I would say that other movements that might be a bit more radical are not so kind if you mention that you're not vegan. You could get excluded, or at least you wouldn't be looked upon very, very kindly. So I think there is a negative aspect of this, of being too exclusive, of not welcoming those that have not come as far as you wish them to come when it comes to like being a vegan or not vegan. And potentially, I think, if you would say, you're welcome, even though I don't care what you eat at the moment, as long as you're active for the animals, you're welcome. Now, it is a tricky question whether you should be more inclusive or less inclusive. I think there is dangers on both sides. Now, the risk of being too exclusive is that you become very dogmatic. You can become like a sect where only the few walks the line and correct in every way. Oh yeah, I forgot something. But being too inclusive it has also its risks, because then you might compromise too much and lose your visions and lose your goals, and that you don't want to do either. This is a picture from a demonstration outside of a slaughterhouse in the Save movement, which came from Canada, but this is a picture of the Swedish Save group in Linköping. And we stand outside of slaughterhouses and sometimes watching the animal transports come in. So this is a picture from one of the transports. Everyone is welcome at our actions, as long as they respect, of course, the others in the group. You don't have to be a vegan. We think by looking those animals in the eye, then you might change also the way you're thinking of who am I eating and what kind of food I'm eating. So we think that's a good idea, that everyone looks their food in their eyes, so to say, if they do eat animals or animal products. Now, I think if you look at those who organize our actions and demonstrations, they are basically vegan, and also we in the board. And maybe that's a good thing, because we are thinking about the visions, so we don't compromise too much. So the question is, how inclusive or exclusive should it be? I think we in the animal rights movement could be a bit more inclusive. The animals need more activists more than they need vegans. That's my belief. And I think if you become active in a movement, sooner or later, if you stay in the movement, you will be moving towards veganism and become vegan. That's my thinking, at least. But we shouldn't let go of our vision to create a society where there is not any exploitation anymore, and a vision of a vegan society. I think that's important to hold on to. So we'll move on to the other movement, which is LGBTQ movement, and what we can learn about fair representation in TV and film. I used to enjoy watching the TV show Friends, which came in the 90s. But some of the views on homosexuality of LGBTQ and also about gender roles feel very outdated today. For instance, there are a lot of jokes about Chandler having a gay panic or so. But in this regard, many things have happened. This is a show, I don't know, I haven't watched that very much, but I know Will and Grace made it a lot of different, because this character Will was a homosexual, a gay, but portrayed as, in general, very nice, normal, had a good job and so on. And nowadays, being gay in TV and film is not seen as something like different or strange or so on. It has really changed, I would say. And of course, that's not by accident. It was the work of a lot of activism from the LGBTQ movement during decades of work in all kinds of fields. But it's interesting to see that there was also an organization working specifically at trying to do something about representation of gays in TV and film. And in 1985, this organization GLAAD was formed, which stands for, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. And the Los Angeles Times wrote possibly one of the most successful organizations to influence medias when it comes to inclusion. And also when they became more script, what do you say, manusförfattare, those who write scripts, of course actors and more directors that were gay themselves or LGBTQ in a way. Then of course that affected what kind of productions they did in a very positive way. Now, how are vegans and animal rights advocates viewed in TV and film? Generally very poorly, I would say, if they're shown at all. This is one example in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. This is a vegan character, and he's seen as very arrogant. I don't know if you have seen that movie. Not very nice portrayed. We have in Friends again, Buffet, Phoebe Buffet, that is sometimes portrayed as vegetarian or perhaps vegan, and she is seen as quirky or kind of irritating many times. In this TV series, The Big Bang Theory, Bernadette's father, I know, he talked about veganism as something doing with not real food and not manly enough, or something like that. But I think, of course, by continue to work in the animal rights movement, being on streets like here, you can see Stockholm Animal Save doing outreach, talking about the animal industry, talking about veganism in a positive way. That can influence the whole of society, including TV and film. I haven't seen any, even internationally, any organization like they had in GLAAD trying to specifically influence how vegans and animal rights advocates are shown in TV and film. But I know PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world, beginning in the US, they have been at least promoting famous people who are vegans and animal rights advocates. So that's at least something. We need people, I think in Sweden there are not many like famous people coming out as vegans and animal rights advocates. So maybe that's something we could help to push for. And of course, as we become, hopefully, more and more vegans and animal rights advocates, there will also be more people writing scripts for films and TV, being directors, being actors, that will eventually influence how vegans and animal advocates are portrayed. So that's my hope also. We have to remember animal rights activism is not only standing with a sign, it can also be writing the next script for a movie or a TV series. I think that would be great as vegans. So now I've gone through these four movements and raised some questions, and my hope is that at least have raised your interest in these. And maybe that you have a willingness to yourself look at these movements and see what we can learn from them. Of course, we can watch documentaries about these, read books, etc., or follow them in real time on social media to learn more. This website I can highly recommend. The Sentience Institute is called, and they have some fundamental questions that talk about different methods and its pros and cons, which can be really informative. And I think sometimes we need to leave the vegan bubble and go out and join other movements and see the animal rights cause is not the only important issue to work on. There are many others. Here I am at a climate protest in Göteborg with Extinction Rebellion last year. Yes. But sometimes we can feel depressed, of course, that not more is happening when so many animals are still suffering so much. We can feel despair that the animal exploitation industries are so powerful. This is the dairy company Arla's offices and how much resources they have. It seems like they are almost unwinnable when they have so much and we feel we have so little. But then it's important to look at the tyranny of now, which the animal rights author Pelestrin Lund writes about. And he says, we seem to think that what is now is a kind of normal and natural order. But that's something that might be wrong. In Sweden in the 1950s, 95% of all Swedish mothers hit their children, spanking them. 95%. And they thought this is not only okay and just, but something you ought to do as a responsible parent. But nowadays, it's almost unthinkable for parents to do this. At least they don't talk about it. And it's against the law to do it as well. So what Pelestrin Lund says is we can learn from history that moral norms can change radically. From going through these movements, maybe my biggest lesson is that huge and positive changes are possible. And that's something I think we should take with us. As you understand, I think it's important to look at these different movements and seeing that they had great odds against them. Look at the anti-slavery movement, the women's rights movement, and the LGBTQ movement. There were very few that thought that they would succeed. Like, for instance, seeing the day when a woman could be married to a woman. There was like something that no one thought possible. But they succeeded with a lot of things. I think creating a vegan society and the end of animal exploitation is equally possible when you look at history, what they have achieved. So I think we should not feel paralyzed. We should look at different methods, different tactics, but don't feel paralyzed because you haven't found like the perfect one. Let us go out and do our best, look at the evidence, and at least try our methods, and to do as best as we can to create a world where animals are free and we can create a vegan society. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.